I bet you are tired of the art advice to just draw more. Just draw more. Just draw more and you'll get good. Just draw more and you'll do better. Just draw more. We're not going to be talking about that today. Instead, this video is going to be jam-packed with actionable tips that you can use right now that aren't vague, like just draw more. By the end of this video, you'll be able to apply these tips to either improve your drawing skills or improve your relationship with art. You've probably heard this first art tip many, many times. And this time I want you to take it to heart. So use references for your art. Do it. Why are you, what? This is number one, do it. Use reference. When you use reference, two things happen. One, you're building your visual library to be able to draw these subjects without reference later on. But second, when you use reference, you're able to see things in your subjects that you may not have committed to memory yet, or you may not remember. There's no way for us to remember every single little detail about the things that we draw, unless it's, we draw it over and over and over. So when you use reference, you're going to be able to identify those things to then add that nuance to your drawing to make it more believable. So use reference. I know that there's a stigma around using references, and there's some idea that maybe it's cheating or maybe it's unethical in your drawing practice. I want you to toss all that out the window. Just, it's gone. Any professional artist I know, myself included, uses references. And if they don't, they're shooting themselves in the foot for what the quality of their work could look like. And I guarantee you, if you don't use art reference, but you begin using art reference today, you're going to see an immediate level up in your skills without changing anything except having the reference in front of you and looking at it when you're trying to draw whatever it is you're trying to draw. Next tip, don't wait for the moment that you feel ready to draw the things that you want to draw. Why did you get into drawing in the first place? There was probably something that you wanted to create, or you wanted to analyze, or you just wanted to copy, something that interested you, that inspired you to start drawing. Now, the thing is, most people, before they allow themselves to draw those things, they think, I need to study this, or I need to watch this tutorial, or I need to practice this thing. And the problem here is that when you aren't drawing for fun, you're only studying, you get into this study loop where everything you make starts to feel a little bit empty because it doesn't fuel that excitement. The whole reason that you got into drawing was to be able to draw your favorite Pokemon or your favorite character or maybe your mom. I don't know. The point is, if you wait to feel ready, you're going to lose that excitement that you had when you first started drawing. So start drawing whatever it is you want to draw, and you will find more joy in your work, which will lead to more drawing. Just draw more. I'm sorry, no, we're not focusing on that today, but it will. It will lead to more drawing, and that will lead to developing your skills and continuing your growth as an artist. So start drawing those things even if you don't feel ready. And my next tip, I think, will help if we can adopt this idea. It will help you be able to draw even when you don't feel ready. So the next tip is draw bad art. Get comfortable with drawing bad art. It's going to be necessary. You have to draw some bad art in order to draw some good art, to get better, to more accurately capture the things that you want to draw. We don't have to show this bad art to everyone. You don't need to plaster it on social media and say, look at all these mistakes that I just made. That's okay. You don't have to do that. You can keep the practice work in a sketchbook or save it on your computer and, hold off on sharing those things that make you feel a little bit vulnerable or a little bit uncomfortable. That's totally fine. But we have to embrace making the bad art so that we can then make the good art. I think there's this idea that if we don't draw it well the first time, we're not cut out to be artists. And by embracing this idea of I'm gonna draw bad art, it's much easier to let go of that idea that we don't have talent, or we aren't cut out for this, or this is just too difficult. There's going to be moments where things are difficult and you're going to draw some bad art, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you, and it doesn't mean you're talentless, and it doesn't mean that the sky is falling. It just means that today, this is where you're at, and all the practice that you put in today is going to contribute to where you end up tomorrow. So draw some bad art. It's okay. And that last tip ties into my next one, which is kind of similar, but I want to reframe it a little bit. My next tip is be accepting of making mistakes. Without mistakes, it is impossible to learn. We need to have the mistakes so that we can see what it is that we need to improve. And there is a positive side to this too that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. When you're able to identify what you need to improve, you also need to practice identifying what you are good at. What are your strengths? What do you do well, despite having things that you still want to learn? And I think having this balance is where we can build our self-confidence, where it's like so many people are like, oh, this sucks and I need to improve this. But no one's saying, you know, I'm actually pretty good at drawing hands, or I really like drawing eyes, or whatever it is that you're drawing. There's less of that. And while I think it's good to be accepting of mistakes, I also think that accepting those mistakes, identifying those mistakes, gives us an opportunity to also see where we are strong. And I think having both of those is a really good way to nurture a positive relationship with your art. Because if we were to say, oh, I'm good at everything, I don't need to learn anything, that's also too extreme. But also thinking that everything is bad doesn't serve you, because that's discouraging. That makes you feel like, again, you're not cut out for it. So be accepting of those mistakes. They help you learn. They also help you see there's potential, there's strengths behind all of this struggle. And the more you accept your mistakes, the more you're able to practice what you're not so good at. And that further builds your confidence. My next tip, and I think I've mentioned this in other videos as well, don't give up after your first sketch. I think that when we spend a lot of time drawing something and it's taken a lot of time, it's been really difficult, and then finally we get it right, we want to cling to that. We want to keep that because it feels like we'll never be able to do that again. But we will. And I think this is why it's important to keep drawing, so that those ideas don't get really precious. It can be really daunting to start again when you feel like this sketch is the best one that you've ever done. On top of that, it's also important to keep on sketching, because there are more ideas that are going to come out the more that you keep sketching. And oftentimes those ideas they can be stronger because you've spent a little bit more time thinking about them or developing them, or maybe just that extra time drawing them makes improvements to what you previously had. Maybe it improves the anatomy or the composition, or maybe the idea is just stronger. So don't stop on that first sketch. Don't get precious with that first sketch. Keep drawing. Keep putting more art out, getting more practice in. Show yourself that you can you can repeat that process of creating work that you're really proud of. And it's not this long, difficult thing that finally, when you get there, that's your moment to rest. I think that the more you do it, the easier it's going to be to keep on doing it. And my next tip is ask for feedback. This is one I think, again, we hear kind of floating around a lot, but it's hard to do. And it's hard to do because I think people either think you need to put it out to the whole internet and let anybody kind of tear it apart, or they aren't sure who to ask for help. You don't need to send it out to the whole internet, to the whole world, and say, like, roast me, because that's a very vulnerable moment and it's very uncomfortable. But you can send it to your peers, to your fellow artists. You can send it to your friends, your family, to just really anyone can objectively look at your work and say, I like this because, or I don't like this because. Or if you're speaking with artists, they might have more technical feedback for you, where it's like, oh, the colors can be improved, or your values are slightly, slightly off. So depending on the type of feedback that you want, you're going to want to ask specific people, but ask the people that you trust and you feel comfortable sharing that vulnerable stage of your work with, because when you share it with total random strangers on the internet, or you just kind of throw it out there and you let anybody take a hit at it, that can sometimes be discouraging and feel a little bit like we're being attacked and not like we're being helped. So it's okay to share it with people that you trust, but I do think feedback is really important. So much of the creative process happens in this isolated space, right? Most of us are alone when we're creating. Our ideas come to us and we work through them for hours, and we're the only ones looking at it. When you share it with others, there's a good chance that the things they tell you may not be things that you notice because you've been staring at the same piece for hours and hours and hours. Maybe not that long, but like a while, enough for you to kind of get blind to some of the things that maybe there's mistakes that you can work on, maybe the idea isn't as strong. Let other people see it and have an opinion about it, so that you can take that information how you will and put it back into your art in some way. So my next tip is draw slower. There's a lot of resistance to this one, and I think it's because when we watch professional artists draw, oftentimes they draw very quickly, or their strokes are very confident, and the piece comes together, without much friction. And so I think this encourages beginner artists, honestly artists at every level, it encourages them to draw very fast because they see these skilled artists drawing fast and they want to also maybe improve their speed. But here's the thing, when you draw slower and you think about what you're drawing, those brush strokes or those pencil strokes or whatever you're drawing with, those become intentional. And with intention, you are much more thoughtful about your process. You're thinking about, why am I placing this line here? What am I trying to represent? What does this lighting look like? Or what does this curve look like? Why am I even putting this line here? Which I think these questions are not things that we're thinking about by default when we're drawing. Most of us draw because there is this automatic experience. We're very present, there's not a lot of thinking. It's almost meditative. And so when we turn our brain on, that kind of goes against that meditative state. And so when you slow down, it forces you to be thoughtful and intentional with what you're drawing. The paradoxical thing here is that when you slow down and you are more thoughtful, your process will speed up because you are taking that time to think about what you're doing. You're developing your decision making during that process, and then that will help you be a faster artist or be able to draw faster. So it's not just about quick scratchy lines or drawing fast for the sake of drawing fast or trying to be loose. These things are important, but just for the sake of speed, they are not serving you. And so if you feel like during the drawing process you are a little bit mindless, slow down, ask some questions. Even if the only question you ask is, why did I place that line there? It's going to force you to slow down anyway. But when you ask that question, you'll start to make intentional decisions about what you're doing in your art, which the more intention you place upon it, the more that's going to lead to you either making decisions about changing it, improving it, or doing it a different way. And all of these things can contribute to developing your skills. The next tip is observe more. Now this can tie into using references, spending more time looking at what it is you're actually drawing, but it can also apply to your day-to-day life. So when you go outside and you go to the coffee shop, pay attention to things like the lighting and the shadows on the ground and the way people move. The more observant you become, your brain is going to be looking for those things and using those things later on when you draw. So paying attention to the little details of life, I think, is very powerful. And the more you get used to this, the more you'll kind of unconsciously do it as well. I found that this was something I started doing more when I started practicing drawing. And now it's something I do all the time, and I don't even, like, when I catch myself doing it, I'm like, oh, huh. But I don't really think about doing it anymore. I'm just kind of like, oh, that's an interesting shape, or that lighting is interesting, or I love the color of, you know, the what the sun is doing to this object. It's usually more specific to what I'm looking at, but I think you get the point. Observe more, pay attention to your surroundings, even when you're not drawing. Next tip, work simple, then add details. I know a lot of you watching this video are artists who get caught up in the details. You start drawing something and all you can see is that super zoomed in version of the tiny little hair on their head, and you've got to capture that just right. Hang on. Zoom out. I'm assuming you're working digitally. If not, you know, take a step back, okay? Focus on the large shapes. Focus on the big values, break things down in a way where it's not so up close and personal. Because what happens when we start with the small details is we spend a lot of time drawing them accurately and trying to get them just right. And we do that for quite some time. And when we finally step back and we look at the big picture, this is where things start to feel a little bit uncanny, or like we realize that mistakes have been made, but we spent hours and hours zooming in on a shoelace, you know, making that shoelace perfect, but the foot is too big, or this can happen with anything. So start with the big simple shapes first, then zoom in and focus on those smaller details. This is going to help you simplify the subject in general into easier to understand shapes, but it's also going to save you time from doing a lot of tiny little detail work that then you may have to change later, or it may look off. My next tip, this is especially for those of you who get stuck in a certain way of drawing and then you can't get out of it. Everything else feels wrong. You're trying to try new things and it's very rigid. I want you to try a new process. Try something that you've never done before, whether it's something that another artist has shared, maybe they share their process online, it's completely different from what you do. Try that. See what happens when you do something that is very different from your normal routine. I think that we get stuck in doing the same thing over and over, and that kind of puts us in a box that doesn't allow us to be as creative or experimental in our work. So if you're not learning from someone else, you can also just purposefully try something different in your work. Maybe the next time, try putting a bunch of texture or brush strokes or something else on the canvas instead of starting with a blank canvas, and see how that changes. See what kind of images you see in those brush strokes, and maybe that will kick you off with a different idea or start you on a different path to working through this process. If you're used to working in black and white first, try with color. If you're used to drawing with lines, start with shapes, or blobs of color or shapes or value, whatever it is. Try something new. I think this keeps the creative process fresh, especially if you've been doing it a very, very long time and your process is set in stone. Trying new things may open you up to opportunities to learn, as well as refresh your excitement for art making. Final tip, and this may be the hardest one of all, trust the process. It's very hard to know that we're on the right path or that we're doing the right things. And I think this is an opportunity to look inside yourself and ask, am I doing what I want to be doing? And if the answer to that is yes, that's permission, keep going. If the answer to that is no, then this is an opportunity for you to look a little bit deeper into that. Because I think when we feel certain in what we're doing, it's much easier to trust the process. And so if you're having trouble trusting the process, is what you're doing right now what you want to be doing? And sometimes when the answer to that is no, that could be in the middle of studying something in particular or drawing something in particular. If your heart says no to what you're doing now, what does it say yes to? Say yes to that thing. Do that thing. And then I want you to try to trust the process in doing that thing. It's less about there being a correct way to do things and more that we're saying no to what we know we want for ourselves and for our art journey. Say yes to whatever your heart is telling you that you want to experience on this journey. And that is how you trust the process. If you've made it this far in the video, let me know if you've tried any of these things in the comments. And if you haven't tried any of them, let me know how they work for you. I know that the tips today were very general to drawing, but if you want to master portrait drawing in 8 weeks, then get on the wait list for my upcoming portrait drawing bootcamp. This is a bootcamp for beginners and hobbyists. So for my advanced artists, maybe hold off. I've got a different course coming. Beginners, I'm talking to you. If you want to go from confused and overwhelmed to creating confident portraits, that's what we're going to be doing. Enrollment is limited to 100 students, so make sure that you get on that wait list and you don't miss out because pre-orders are coming very, very soon. I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, do all the things. Say goodbye to Luna. Luna, we're leaving now. She's like, I don't care. I'm sleeping. Anyway, bye guys. Just draw more.